Well, I thought you did a good job of presenting the bleak picture in the world. No, I mean the situation in the world is terrible. Okay, let's just be honest. I mean there are a lot of potential things that are, the potential positive things that do exist in the real world, so to speak. But the situation now is very bad. It's an expression of these oppressive societies, all the ones you mentioned, obviously including the U.S., feeling strains, experiencing strains and certain crises, and to go back to the Laura Ingrams and the Tucker Carlsons and the rest of them on the fascists on Fox, there is a real sense in which the world and the countries of, as these people have known them are being objectively transformed into a significant degree, torn apart in ways that are that have brought forward these fascist forces. I talked at the beginning in part one about all these 5 stops and for example, the close interconnection between what's happening with the environment and the immigrant crisis, which is greater than what's caused by the environmental crisis. But it's a massive phenomenon. People on the move, in huge numbers. 65 million people is a tremendous number of people to be immigrants and refugees without a home, basically, and it is, in certain ways, overwhelming or at least challenging what has been the existing bourgeois and oppressive societies as they've existed up to now in these countries. All that is being greatly played on and greatly exaggerated by these fascist forces. But there's some reality to it. My feeling is, and my answer to all these people who complain about all the immigrants coming, across the border, many of them illegally, like, say, into the U.S., well, okay then, give up everything that every parasitic benefit that you get from everything that's caused these immigrants to do this in the first place, and then after you've done that, then come back and see if you want to complain about the immigrants, because this you can't have it both ways. They want to have it both ways, but you can't. You want to have all the plunder and all the destruction and all the disruption and all the upheaval that your system causes and all the exploitation, including of little children all around the world, which wreaks havoc in these countries, and then you want to complain when the people come here. No, you cannot have it both ways, motherfucker. I mean, look at the Congo. Many people don't know much about what's happening in the Congo, but they should. In the past couple of decades in the Congo, I think more than 5 million people have died in these internecine, conflicts within the Congo. And you could sit there and say, oh, another shithole country. Look what the people are doing to each other. But just as what's happening in the inner cities among the black and brown people and the youth in particular here, on a much more massive scale, what's happening in a place like the Congo is directly attributable to what the imperialist system has done there over more than 100 years. I mean, I'll get back to more directly to what you were raising, but this is part of the world picture, too, that's very important. I mean, do you know, for example, how many people know? I sometimes like to pose these questions. You go on a college campus, and you ask people who are graduate students and professors, for example, what percentage of people would know the answer to this question? Under the rule of Leopold, King Leopold of Belgium, who ran the Congo at the end of the 19th century and into the next, as a personal preserve, out of the 20 million people or so who lived in the Congo during those times, what percentage were killed under the rule of Leopold? Somewhere between 7 and 10 of the 20 million, almost a half of the population. Almost nobody knows about this. Think about that. They were put to work under the most horrific conditions, mining rubber and other things, and if they didn't meet the quotas or in some other way they were considered a problem, they had their hands cut off if they weren't killed. This is what, the great enlightened Western imperialism was doing in this one country. And then, finally, after World War II, when there was an independence struggle in the Congo, and you got Patrice Lumumba came forward as a popular nationalist leader, and became the leader of the Congo, what happened? The U.S. imperialists moved to get rid of Lumumba. The CIA and the rest of them worked to get him captured by, opposing forces that were their puppets, basically, and he was assassinated. And what came out of all that? Mobutu, who was kept in power by the U.S. for 4 decades, plundering the country and as a puppet of the U.S. for 4 decades, and subjecting the massive people there to terrible conditions. And this is why the Congo is such a mess now. And millions more people are dying. So don't fucking complain to me about immigrants coming across the border illegally, okay? Just shut the fuck up about immigrants coming across the border illegally. Look what you have done to the people in the world. And you have the nerve to complain about people coming here trying to get a job so they can feed their family, and calling them rapists and murderers and so on. But there are a lot of strains objectively on all these countries that you mentioned. Isn't it wonderful? Look, the Soviet Union was no good for decades. It was a capitalist, in fact, even when it was socialist in name, and it was social imperialist from the mid-50s on. In other words, socialist in name, but imperialist in reality. But isn't it wonderful that finally, all these Eastern European countries have been freed from the domination of the Soviet Union? Aren't wonderful things happening under the rule of these bourgeoisies in all these countries like Hungary and these other places, or Poland, and all, fascists rising to power, essentially. And this is what's happening in response to these great changes that are taking place in the world, including the immigrant crisis, is contributing to this. It's a fascist response to the immigrant crisis, as well as other factors. A revolutionary response would be to absorb massive people coming and make them become part of the positive force transforming the society. But the imperialists can't do that. And the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class, and the capitalist system can't do that. So they both exploit them, or super exploit them in intense exploitation, and, particularly the fascist forces within the ruling circles seize on this to build up a whole fascist backlash against these immigrants who were there because of the havoc that's been wreaked on their country, on their own countries, fundamentally because of the workings of imperialism in terms of the effect on the environment, as well as the wars and the general disruption. I mean, I cited the example of NAFTA and what happened there, but you could go, many countries, and back in 2003, I cited the example of, in a talk, revolution talk back then, I cited the example of Jamaica and how many farmers there were ruined by the subsidizing of milk from the U.S., which, and the same thing happened in Haiti. You can go on revcom.us and read about Haiti and how the agricultural economy of the peasants in Haiti was ruined by the penetration and dominance of the U.S. and the particular policies that were created there. So again and again and again, this is what's causing both this tremendous upheaval and chaos in the world and in countries throughout the world, and it's also what is giving rise, or a big factor giving rise, to these fascist movements that you're talking about.
Revolution, how we can really make revolution.